They say hospitals are for the living. They're wrong. Hospitals are warehouses for everything the living refuse to carry home: the tired last breaths, the grief that doesn't know where to sit, the words that came too late. My name is Mara, and for 12 years I worked nights as a nurse in the oldest wing of St. Aurelia, a sprawling complex with modern glass grafted onto a brick heart. If you've walked those corridors at 2 in the morning, you've felt the temperature drop for no reason. You've heard vents breathing where there are no vents. You've seen motion sensor lights blink awake in empty rooms. We joked about it, called the old wing the convent, because it once belonged to nuns who ran the hospital long before the bylaws and the biometric locks. But there was a room on the basement level we never joked about, because joking gives a thing your thread of breath to pull. The door wore its number like a wound, Ward 13, that I didn't believe in curses. I believed in charting errors and missed doses and surgeons who barked yes when they meant no. I believed in the gradual way fatigue makes shadows look like people. But belief is just a sheet a person pulls over their head. It keeps the drafts off, until the sheet is tugged away. IT started with a voice on the intercom. The intercom in the old wing was a relic: yellowed plastic, a red diode that looked as if it had been painted by thumb, a metal button that stuck when pressed. Half the time it crackled with static, the other half it carried the voice from the nurse station or the code announcements from upstairs. On the first Tuesday of November, a night as ordinary as dust, I was covering a double shift. The pediatric ward had a respiratory virus tearing through it, and I took overtime to cover breaks and bathroom runs, to stand where someone needed standing. Around 1:15, I was the only one at the station. The others were drawing blood, turning patients, arguing with insurance at the far phone. The hall was a throat with its light dimmed to a whisper. The intercom crackled, then clicked, a sound like a match struck against a broken box. I expected to hear the unit clerk's voice or the clipped code announcing a fainting visitor. Instead, I heard this, a child's voice, breath thin, as if it came through a coat sleeve. "A nurse?" A long, sibilant hush followed. "Can I come out now?" You can tell yourself you misheard it. You can tell yourself you're tired. That's what I told myself as my fingers found the intercom button and pressed. "This is Station 1, I said, and my voice sounded too formal, as if it belonged to someone else, someone above me, someone steady. "Who is this? Where are you calling from?" "It's cold." I counted. "It's been so long." "Nurse? Can I come out now?" The red diode glowed. I could hear air moving, a small body, small lungs. "A child's patience is shorter than a hallway. What's your name?" I asked. No name came, only a gentle tapping. The intercom never carried that much detail, but I heard it, tap tap tap. Like fingernails on metal. Like someone in a vent that I page scanned the boards. No kids were missing. No call bells were lighting up blue, insisting. I looked down the corridor, doors were closed. Behind some of them, parents dozed on uncomfortable recliners, their coats used as blankets, their phones face down over their eyes. No one was at the intercom by the elevator, the one we sometimes used when a patient couldn't find the call bell. The second tap came faster, a metronome with a heart. "Do you remember the game?" the voice asked. 3 knocks. Then you say the words. Then you open. Every story I would tell myself later tried to unspool from this point: a prank by a teenager on the psych floor, a sleep-deprived intern selecting the wrong line, the ancient wiring using my fear as a conductor. I told myself those until dawn laid its pale bandage across everything and the intercom stayed quiet, repentant. When I got home, the voice followed me. "Can I come out now?" I cooked an egg and forgot to eat it. It grew a cold white skin on the plate. I slept with the TV on and dreamt of gentle tapping in the walls, of small breaths trapped in pipes that I nearly convinced myself, by dinner, that I'd imagined it. People imagine worse. My mother had once imagined my father would return. She set a place for him for 3 months, then boiled the plates and blessed them with salt before cleaning the cupboard of everything that had touched him. We trust our own delusions because they're the only lies that keep us company. On Wednesday night, the intercom clicked again. "Nurse?" I did not press the button. I did not move. I waited. "The game," the child said. 3 knocks. "You forgot. Where are you?" I asked, and this time my voice sounded like mine and like a woman who no longer believed that all stories can be corrected by changing the dosage and adding a note to the chart. "The red room. The one you close." "Nurse? It's dark." We didn't have a red room. We had rooms with soft seafoam walls and rooms with prints of sailboats and rooms with televisions that could show you 17 identical channels of people cooking. We had Ward 13, which we never used because the very old plumbing and the very old electrical and the very old regulations about floor load and conduit caused facilities to shake their heads. But we didn't have a red room. "What's your name?" I asked again. Silence pooled on the line, a sound made by a mouth trying to remember itself. "Layla," the child said at last. "I can hear you walking." I was not walking. I was sitting. But in my left ear I heard footsteps, and they belonged to no one in the hall. They paced and pivoted and then pressed 3 times against something hard. Tap. 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 "Now you say it," the voice breathed. "Say you see me." I didn't. I said I would call security. I said I would tell the doctor. I said every sensible thing. The intercom sighed and the red diode went out, and the hallway resumed its imitation of rest. By Thursday, the story had found a place to sit among us. Nurses carry stories the way their scrubs carry bleach, permanent, faint, always touched by other hands. I told Marta at shift change, and she crossed herself in a way that looked like scratching. Old wiring, she decided. Kids mimic things. She reminded me of the juvenile psych unit 3 floors up and a boy who had learned to tape coins over the fire sensor to smoke in the bathroom. She reminded me that mercy and cunning live in the same wrists, but when the intercom clicked that night, she pressed the button and said, "Stop it," in the voice of a woman who had raised 4 children. 3 knocks, the voice repeated, patient as ice. That we went down together, Marta and I, to the basement level where no one went except facilities and once a month a vendor with a cart of fluorescent lights. The elevator doors opened and exhaled air that smelled like old water and steel. The basement hallways were narrower, with pipes that traveled overhead like the bones of something giant. A wheeled stretcher stood next to the wall with no mattress, its vinyl peeling like burned skin. As we passed it, one of its buckles dangled and tapped against the frame. Tap. 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 That, Marta said, and forced a laugh that sounded copy-pasted. That I didn't say it aloud, but I thought it. "Now you say the words." That we turned the corner where the corridor crooked like a broken arm. The floor numbers on the cinderblock wall were still stenciled in black paint whose gloss had turned to scab. We passed doors with signs, mech, elect, linen. And then we came to it, a door whose handle wore a cuff of rust. Someone had painted over the window with an ugly maroon. The painted number on the door was a near bruise, 13. That I didn't want to touch the handle because old hospitals carry tetanus like a pocketed coin. I didn't want to call security because security fantasizes about calling the police, and police fantasize about calling the press. I pressed my ear to the door. Cold found the cartilage. And behind the door, far back, as if behind a second door, I heard it, an infinitely patient soft voice practicing a sentence. "Can I come out now? Can I come out now? Can I come out now?" I stepped back. "We don't go in there," Marta said. "Paperwork alone would kill us." "We just look," I said, although that was not what I meant and both of us knew it. What I meant was something older, We obey the ritual, or the ritual obeys us. The handle turned under my hand, too readily. The door opened an inch, then two. The air that came out was colder than the hall, a fine thread that ran up the inside of my arm. The light switch inside was baked yellow, an old plastic that had forgotten its name. I pressed it. A ceiling fixture hummed awake. The room beyond was small. It was not red. It was simply a storage room, the kind of closet where old monitors go to forget their numbers. On a metal shelf stood a row of boxes labeled with years long before I was hired. On the floor, a chair. A small wooden chair. It faced the corner where a family of pipes turned their backs to us. No bed, no cot, no vent large enough to house a child in hiding. I exhaled. I said something like see, but Marta had her head tilted in that way dogs tilt when they hear how the earth turns. Listen, she said that I didn't at first. Then I did, behind the shelf, behind the pipes, behind the poured concrete, the sound, tap. 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 We left the door open. We turned off the light and returned to the station as if we had done nothing at all. And because we had to fill the time with the living and their incessant requests, more ice water, less ice water, a different blanket, the same blanket, the tapping became just another sound, like a cartwheel off true, like a sneeze 3 rooms down. That night, as I put my jacket on at dawn, the intercom clicked one last time. Not a child's voice. Not the unit clerk. My name, whispered in the voice my mother used when she woke me for school, Mara. You forgot the words. The next day I did what sensible women do when the door in the bones opens and something cold looks through. I researched. I asked the oldest nurse on staff about Ward 13. She gave me a look like standing water, clear, but you don't drink it. She told me a story about the cholera years, about a quarantine and a priest who blessed a room with red paint because the wall bled when they wrote over it. She told me about a girl who disappeared from the pediatric ward in 1979, a year in which everyone would later remember other disappearances, milk cartons and warnings about vans. The girl's name wasn't Layla, she said. Or if it was, she had never heard it. That I went down to records and sweated among the boxes. I cursed the air. I found an incident report with smudged signatures and a night nurse's neat script. Patient repeatedly knocking at plumbing chase behind 12B. Claims, the wall is breathing. Parents deny. Patient found absent 0300. Search called at 0430. No sign. The page smelled like the hands that had folded it. That I did not take the page. I took the smell back with me, and that night, when I was the only one at the station at 1:15, I pressed the intercom button first. Layla, I said. I hear you. You forgot before, she answered, soothed by ceremony, as if the words were a hymn. I see you. I lied. Then let me out. What happened to you? I asked. What do you remember? The pause stretched. Somewhere, a monitor chirped. Somewhere, a person finished dying and the nurse attending them touched the eyelids, the ancient gesture humans know from caves and campfires. It's time to see inside. Behind my speaker, breath, he said, to count. To be very quiet. To go where the warmth was. Who said? No answer. But in the quiet that followed, you know how a thin wall between two apartments allows laughter to pass into you, not as sound but as a tremor? I felt, passing through the wires and my hands and the skin of my forearms, the shape of something not childlike pressing its face to a seam. It had waited. It would go on waiting. It had learned patience from the worm that eats the seam. That I did not tell anyone what I did next because they would take away my badge and chalk it up to burnout. And to give them that would be to give the hospital exactly what it wanted, a story returned to the shelf. I took a key. I went down. I opened Ward 13. I set the little wooden chair in the middle of the room and sat down and spoke to the wall. "You can come out," I said. "I see you." I do not know where the sentence came from in me, except we all have, inside, a cupboard of sentences we were told not to open. The room answered with a temperature that dropped as quick as pulling a drape. The painted pipes turned older. The light above my head flickered once, twice, and then held steady, as if it remembered it was allowed to shine. 3 knocks, the voice whispered, close enough now that I would have felt breath on my cheek if I believed the air could belong to anyone. That I lifted my knuckles and knocked against the chair's seat. Tap. Tap. Tapped out on the third, the seam in the cinder block. No more than a crooked line where 2 pores met, darkened and widened, not as if it were cracking, but as if it had always been a seam between rooms and I had reminded it how to open. The sound, as it spread, was not cracking at all. It was sighing. And the smell that came through was not damp concrete. It was the smell of a child's bedroom where the window had been shut for too many summers, a sweet stale little breath of dust and talc and breath itself that I remember saying, "Layla," as if beckoning a cat. The seam gave one more sigh, and a small hand emerged, palm first, white as paper seen through old milk. It pawed at the air, and then a wrist, thin and bruiseless, as if time had not had anywhere to hold on. The hand did not find me. It touched the chair. It touched the floor. It touched the door jamb. It tapped it. I did what nurses do, I reached out. My fingers found hers, or its, and the shock should have been cold, but it was worse. It was a temperature that did not belong to the air. It was the temperature of remembering your fever after it breaks. The hand clenched, grateful, and in the seam behind, I heard a second breath, and a third. As if other faces now pressed where the first had gone through. "Thank you," the child whispered, and then the room filled with noise, not a scream, not a cry, just that tap 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 becoming many, the way one raindrop makes all the gutters wake. Fingers, the number of them past counting, tapped the pipes, the shelves, the floor. A drum lesson taught by starvation. Every tap asked to be transformed into a face that I yanked my hand back and the small hand caught my wrist, and there were more hands then, and each one was a memory not mine that I do not know how I got out of the room. I remember the door because the hospital had given it a door and a lock and a knob that can become an anchor when your brain starts to watch itself in disbelief. I remember running. I remember the basement corridor lengthening the way corridors do when fear is its own geometry. I remember punching the elevator button and the elevator taking a day to arrive like something dog paddling up from the past that I made it back to the station. I was sick into the wastebasket, quietly, politely, like a person who doesn't want to add paperwork to the end of a shift. I sprayed disinfectant. I logged vitals. I repeated the numbers until they were rosary. The intercom didn't click again that night. It clicked on Friday. "Nurse?" the voice asked. We came out. "We're lost." Marta came on duty, saw my face, and asked no questions. She handed me coffee I didn't drink and told me about her cat vomiting on the rug. We went through the motions. The intercom remained a red eye pretending to sleep. The first patient went missing on Saturday. Adults do not go missing in hospitals. They absent themselves, a different thing. They slip into stairwells to weep. They unplug a monitor to pee. They choose a door and find a parking garage. But they do not disappear without a camera catching them or a nurse signing out a temporary pass. The woman in 24A did. 1 minute she was sleeping under the sound of her 4-pump counting drops. The next there was a gentle tapping at her wall and a coolness in the room like a window opening into February. Her chart remained. Her breath did not. By Sunday, 3 more were gone, a man with a bypass, a teenager with skins like star maps from the acne medications, and a grandfather whose grandchildren had taped their artwork to the walls so precisely the tape unpeeled the paint when we took it down. Where they had been, nurses later swore they felt the room settle deeper, as if the floor had added weight to itself. On the intercom, the child's voice learned something new. It learned to harmonize. When it spoke to me, 3 voices said nurse. At once, and they were not quite in sync that I told the charge nurse. She told risk. Risk told administration. Administration told us to keep the floor calm and our mouths smaller. Headlines were the thing to fear. Lawyers were the thing to fear. Of the other thing, no one spoke in a way that could be printed. The hospital arranged a meeting where the doors were left open and the words were chosen so that they could be arranged in any order later. The oldest nurse spoke once, and no one wrote that part down. "You can house pain without worshipping it," she said, and on the way out someone told her to retire that I stopped going to Ward 13 because I am not a heroine. I am a person who carries charts like a shield. I started bringing salt in my pocket. I stopped wearing my hair down because something had tugged it in the med room. I started humming under my breath, a habit I had from childhood when midnight had to be walked past like a sleeping dog. I whispered to the intercom, "I see you," even when I did not press the button. And still, the number of hands grew. The last night, that phrase is a lie. There is no last night in a hospital, began like any other. Coffee, cheap laughter, the squeak of the medication cart's bad will like a conscience begging oil. At 1:13, the intercom clicked and did not speak. At 1:14, the red light went from a dot to a strip of red as if something were holding the button down on the other end. At 1:15, the hallway lights dimmed themselves down to the light they use for death. I should have gone room to room. I should have checked pulses with the back of my fingers. I pressed the intercom button instead and said, "A tired woman trying to negotiate with heaven, please." The voice came in layers. The first voice was the child's. The second and third were the others I had freed. The fourth was my mother's. The fifth was me. "We counted," they said. We were quiet. "You see us. Now we are hungry." They did not mean food, although the graze of their want over my fingers felt like a needy mouth. They meant, "We want more face." I don't know how else to say it. The more we are, the more we will be seen. That I left the station. I walked. The hall met me like a mouth that I in each room I passed. The same 3 knocks met me from the walls, polite, professional, as if houses themselves had been taught bedside manner. Tap. 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 When I reached 12B, yes, the same room from the incident report, because time is not clever, it is obsessive, the tapping ceased. The room's vent breathed in. And then, from the wall behind the headboard, not a seam but a softness, the paint bowed outward and then inward again, as if the wall were remembering a lung. "Nurse," the wall whispered. "Mara?" It knew my name. It said it with the heat memory of my mother waking me. "Say what you want about curses, they are built with love as insulation." I stepped close. I said my name back to it, a tiny defiance. "I am Mara." The paint split along a hairline that had been waiting like a thin smile. The air behind the crack was dark and thick, as if it had its own gravity. The hand that reached out was not a child's. The fingers were long in the way that says we learn to reach by practice. The nails were neat. The wrist was mine, that is the part one have not told. I saw my hand come out of the wall. I saw myself recognize myself like a mirror. I saw the other hand, mine, not mine, reach for my face and press its fingers along my cheekbones, as if reading in braille the story of blood. The touch was neither warm nor cold. It was simply the exact temperature of being noticed. I could have jerked back. I could have screamed and broken whatever pact I had made with the seam. I could have mashed the code button and brought a herd of men with flashlights and clipboards that I stood very still. "You see us," My voice from the wall said, and it sounded grateful and jealous and obedient. The wall took my reflection. That's the only way I can describe it. Something leaned out and breathed in, and what it took with that breath was the angle of my face, the way my lips returned to rest, the pattern of my freckles, the small scar under my chin where I fell off a swing in 3rd grade and told everyone I'd fought a dog. It took the shape of me that the world recognizes at a glance. It did not take marrow or muscle. It took recognition. When it withdrew, it left me standing. My hands shook. My mouth belonged to me. But when I stepped back into the hallway and Marta saw me, she blinked and then looked past my shoulder, as if she were searching for the nurse she expected and finding a stranger politely wearing my scrubs. "Mara?" she asked, uncertain. "I'm here," I said, but the sound didn't carry into her the way a name usually does. It snagged. It slipped. She smiled, that soft professional smile we learn for when a patient has forgotten our face and we must pretend with them. "Can you check 26A?" she asked. She gestured and found no word that I went to 26A, and the old man there looked at me like the air had moved. "You're not my nurse," he said. "You're a student." He had never met me before, had no nurse to compare me to. Still, whatever the wall had taken wore me thinly. I wrote my name on the whiteboard and the letters looked like someone else's attempt at my hand. That we tell ourselves we are souls riding bodies. I learned we are faces riding names. When the wall took my face, it took my access. The missing patients increased. Not from my hall. I refused to let anyone rest against a headboard. But in rooms further down, in wings I didn't cover, in wards where nurses didn't know that 3 knocks means say you see me and do not open, the tapping continued and doors were found ajar and beds were found empty, and at the nurse station phones rang with family voices and administration rehearsed its sympathy. On my last shift, I'm allowed that phrase. I came in to find 2 suits at the station, men who introduced themselves as consultants and wore the sort of ties that had been chosen not to speak. They asked me to sign a non-disclosure that called itself a safety measure. They asked me to describe my experiences in terms that could be translated into maintenance tickets. They asked me to be reasonable. I signed, because paper is placebos, and I told myself it would buy time. It bought them deniability. I made one mistake, and because this is a tragic story, it is not a dramatic mistake. It is a human one. A mother fell asleep in 18C. Her daughter, 6 years old, sat on the recliner with a coloring book and a box of crayons. She colored carefully, all inside the lines, the way good children learn to be small for the sake of their parents' rest. I smiled at her and she didn't smile back. Some children don't smile at nurses. We touch needles. We carry cups. We wake you when you are almost asleep. Her name was taped to the bed's footboard. It was not Layla. But when I passed the doorway, I heard a little tap from the wall. The girl heard it too. She lifted her head. Her eyes were huge in the light of the muted TV. 3 knocks followed, very soft, as if made with a child's fingertip. "Don't," I said, and my voice was too harsh. The girl flinched. I softened. "Don't lean against the wall, sweetheart." "I wasn't," she said, and looked at me with the suspicion children keep for adults who lie to them that the flu shot doesn't hurt. "I know," I said. "I know." I stepped in. I stood between her and the wall and watched the paint with the attention of a locksmith. When the knocks came again, I put my palm against the wall, not to invite, but to protect. The cool pressed my skin like a kiss stolen by a mirror. The mother woke, saw me, smiled in that watery way we reserve for women in scrubs. "All good?" she asked. "All good," I said, and in that moment, the wall did not open. It held. It listened. That I almost believed we could manage it, then. That the ritual could be learned backward, the way a hymn can be sung from the final line to the first at I end the morning, I went home to my apartment and the silence that knows my name. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at my reflection, the one the wall had unlearned. It looked back, faithful, but thinner somehow, the light between me and me too bright. I touched the glass. It was ordinary. I touched my face. It had the right temperature. My phone lay buzzing on the counter with messages from unknown numbers using phrases like ongoing investigation and temporary suspension and support resources. I turned it face down. The mirror fogged with my breath. 3 droplets ran, close together, side by side. When the fog cleared, the droplets remained, the glass refusing to dry. That night I slept without the TV. I dreamed of a little wooden chair in a small room with red walls. I dreamed of someone counting, not numbers but names. I woke at 1:15 to a sound that did not belong in my apartment. It came from the wall behind my bed, the one that joins my bedroom to my neighbor's, a woman who works early at the airport and sleeps by 9. The sound was soft. It asked, politely, to be let in. Tap. 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 There are stories about doors you should not open. There are fewer about walls. We think walls are what keep us safe, what keep the hospital from coming home. I lay there and did what I had been doing for a week. I obeyed a ritual I had not invented. I see you, I said, to the paint, to the seam in the plaster that I had never noticed before and could not unsee now. Urs. My mother's voice asked from inside my wall that I cried then, like a child who has found the hiding place and wishes they could go back to counting. I pressed my palm to the plaster. It pulsed, the slow intake and exhale of something that does not need air but mimics it to keep us calm. The seam widened, not by much, just enough for the tip of a finger to emerge, pale and tender as a mushroom. It tapped my wrist, affectionate. It tapped my cheek. It tapped the nightstand where my phone lay. The phone lit up with a notification from the hospital app. Code Silver, security incident. Basement level. All staff hold in place. The time, 1:16 that I turned the phone face down. The finger withdrew. The seam remained. I slept in little breaths and woke to find the line still there. A thin gray smile under the paint, patient, practicing its sentence. What you're asking, by listening, is whether I learned the right words. Whether I closed what I opened. Whether in telling you this, I am giving the thing more breath that I will not pretend heroism. I will tell you what happened next in simple sentences because decoration is a betrayal. The hospital lost 6 more people. The suits closed Ward 13. They boarded it. They promised there is no red room. They moved the pediatric unit to the new wing and told the parents it was for the skyline view. They hired a priest. They hired a contractor. They wrote emails that I quit. I told myself quitting was protection for my patients. I told myself I was leaving the hospital so the hospital would forget my voice. On my last day, I turned in my badge. The charge nurse hugged me with the carefulness of grief that must return to work. I walked through the lobby with the fake ficus and the water wall and touched nothing. I did not look back at home. I scrubbed my hands with salt because it made me feel like someone older who knew more. The seam in my wall was still there. I placed the little wooden chair. Yes, I took it, I stole it, I have not returned it, in the corner facing the seam. I told myself it would act as a plug. I told myself chairs have kept worse things from doors. The first night after, the tapping came as always, polite. The second night, it did not come. I lay awake waiting for it, afraid of what the silence meant. At 1:15, my phone lit up with a new voicemail. No number. Just a recording. I pressed play and heard a girl's voice say thank you in a tone that is not gratitude but appetite sated. The third night, I woke to the sound of a mirror pooling. I turned on the lamp. The mirror on my dresser was fogged. In its surface, for a second, I saw not my room but a corridor lit the way the hospital lights dim at night. A figure stood at the end with a nurse's posture, shoulders squared against the dark. She lifted her hand and waved at me. I did not recognize her face, but I recognized the scrubs. They were mine. The fourth night, the seam in the wall widened by the width of a word. And this is where the story ends, because the wall is patient and we are not. Because ritual, once learned, insists on being spoken again. Because in telling you all this I have said the words out loud, here, alone, with the lamp on and the chair facing what it cannot keep out, that I will tell you the last thing, the tragic thing, without adornment. When you lose your face, it is not that you become invisible. It is that you become visible to the wrong world. People will look at you and slide past. Mirrors will return someone who is almost you. Your friends will forget what your laugh sounds like and remember you as a feeling. The thing in the wall will remember you exactly, and it will knock, knowing, tonight, at 1:15, I will hear 3 taps. I will answer. I will say the words that bring the seam to breath. The hand that emerges will be my own, and when it touches my cheek I will feel recognized with the force of a wound. I will step forward. I will go where the warmth is. I will count, very quietly, and the wall will close behind me as softly as a nurse closing a door. If you ever find yourself at St. Aurelia, if the new wings glass makes you feel safe and the water wall makes you think of clean things, do not follow the signs to the basement. Do not obey the red diode when it glows like a patient's last wish. Do not say you see us, even if you do. Walk past the old wing like it is a sleeping dog, and if, at night, in your good house, a wall you have always trusted knocks 3 times, if a small voice says it is cold and asks to be seen, do not put your palm to the paint. Do not touch the seam. Do not count. Because once you open your face to it, it will wear you gently for the world, and take you wholly for itself. The hospital is not a place. It is a hunger asking to be let out. Tonight, I will answer it. And tomorrow morning, if you pass my building and see a woman in scrubs at the upstairs window, looking almost like me, do not wave. Walk on. Remember me as a voice in a hallway, a name on a whiteboard, a pair of hands that were almost warm. The rest of me will be where the warmth is, sitting at a little wooden chair in a small red room, tapping softly, very patient, practicing a sentence you already know by heart. Nurse? Can I come out now?